What's up, everybody? Corey Raymond here, your host of the Wisconsin Investor Podcast. Guys, I'm really excited to be here with you today. But we're going to talk about some expensive lessons I just learned, and we're doing it so you guys don't have to. People think, experience, it comes from wins. It really doesn't. It comes from getting punched in the face financially. So I paid some tuition recently on a few different investments, and today I'm going to break them down for you guys so you can learn from my pain instead of writing the same checks I did. So, nobody in real estate shares their losses, or very few people do. Everybody posts about the wins, and we're guilty about that on this podcast as well, of bringing guests on here. And a lot of times, we try to bring up some of the mistakes they've learned, but a lot of times we want to talk about the successes. We want to learn from what's working really well for them. But the losses are where a lot of the growth happens. Hopefully, right? The goal is you don't make the same mistakes a few times. And a lot of the mistakes I'm going to talk about today, they weren't really rookie mistakes. They were mistakes that came from me running too fast, making some assumptions, and having a lack of structure. So if you guys are scaling your business at all, you're going to face some of these same traps. And I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. I want you to win faster than I did. And really, what I'm learning here is when you stop learning, this business starts charging you tuition. So learn from my mistakes and don't make the same mistakes that I did. So here's a little first example. I'm going to just go through a few examples for you guys today on some properties. If you follow me on social media at all, on Facebook in particular, you've seen this property in Jacksonport, Wisconsin, which is up in Door County, that I've been documenting over the last year and kind of sharing some of the struggles with this one. So what happened with this property, I had decided to sell a few of my properties that I had a good amount of equity in, and I was going to refinance those properties, or I was going to sell those properties and then take that capital and put it into, bigger deals, or, maybe just pull it out and invest it in another property, similar purchase price, but a better asset, those types of things, and then refinance that asset, take the cash out tax free, and go invest that in a fund at 10 or 12% and kind of double dip a little bit. All right. What I should have done is just refinance some of those properties and done the same strategy, but kept the properties that I sold because they were good properties. But anyway, I was in this spot last year in 2024, depending on when we're releasing this, when you're listening to this, 2024. And I had sold one of my properties, and I was looking at where could I park this money 1031 style. And an opportunity came up from a seller that I had worked with in the past. She had this property in Jacksonport, and it had a big pole building on it. On the back of the property, it was an 1.5 acre parcel, pretty close to the beach in Jacksonport. I mean, we're literally like, you could walk to the beach here. And so I'm thinking like, ooh, Airbnb, that'd be cool. And the house was really run down. I mean, it was pretty rough. It was full of stuff. She hadn't lived there in like 5 or 6 years. And so, we walked in it, we knew, man, there's a lot of work that has to get done here, but it's about 1,500 square feet. It had a loft upstairs and could have probably been saved in rehab, but I mean, it was going to need one of everything: siding, gutters. The roof was actually okay. Windows, you name it. The floors, it was an old mobile home. And then what they had done is they had taken and built a shell outside of the mobile home and then tore the walls down inside. So foundationally, it was a little like the walls on the outside were starting to slope. So it looked like, in the middle of the house, but then that was the high point. And then on the outside of the house, it was kind of sinking. So that would all had to been jacked back up and resupported and everything else. Anyway, I saw this vision. I was like, oh yeah, 100 grand, maybe we'll put into this thing and it'll be great. So contractor goes out there. He comes back after we close on it, and he's doing his bid, and he's like over 100 grand. And he calls me and he's like, dude, I'm at like 110, 120 right now, and I'm not even done. So at this point, he's like, you might be better off just going and like ripping this thing down and putting up like a manufactured house on here and going that route, because you can get them for like around that price. I was like, dude, that's a great idea. Then everything's brand new. I don't have to worry about this old house and like trying to, put lipstick on a pig kind of thing here. And so I was all excited about it, right? So I'm like, this is great. Well, I just was running 100 miles an hour. So I go meet with I shopped around, found a mobile home design I liked, went to the dealership. It was more expensive right away than what I was originally planning. So I was looking at some for around that $120,000 mark. Turned out it was like the one I decided on was like 172,000, I believe. And that was just the house. So here's what I did. I went into a whole new asset type without doing proper due diligence. I was just, again, well, we'll figure it out. Again, I still agree. Like, I've learned so many lessons from going through this project that will hopefully save me maybe from doing something like this again in the future. Or if I do something like this again in the future, I now know I know the numbers much better of how to run the numbers. And so what ended up happening is I got this thing. And over the last year, on a previous episode, I talked about the opportunity cost missed out from doing everything. Well, I'm the one doing everything. I'm the bottleneck on this example, and it's costing me opportunity costs for other deals or growing my team or whatever else I could be doing, spending time with my family. I spent so much time trying to figure out this process this year and so much frustration that if I could go back and redo it all over again, not buying that deal would have been the best deal I did in 2024 in all reality. So we're still not fully up and operational on this thing. It's been over a year now. So I ordered the house, thought I could reuse the foundation that I had underneath the existing mobile home because I was like, well, if I could just get another one, there was already the steel beams underneath and everything else. I can just plop a new one right on here. And if I got to add a little bit to the concrete, probably no big deal. Again, didn't do any due diligence on that before I signed for the new house. It turns out you can't do that. You got to put a whole new foundation in if it's not the right thickness or where the beams are going to go is not exactly lined up. You have to have a different type of foundation in there. So I had to put a whole new slab in. All right. Then we found out that the well was a non-conforming well. So I had to redo the whole well. So that was another $18,000 to $20,000 by the time I was done with all the tests I had to do, all this other sort of stuff. So it was a very expensive lesson. A couple other things. You've got to have skirting on these things. So you either got to throw up some cheap stuff, which still is not cheap, or you've got to get like there's like these, I don't know what you call them, like decorative stone rock thingies, blocks, whatever that you can go around. Either way, I didn't understand. I was looking at about $10,000 to $12,000 to get on some kind of skirting on there of anything that looked decent. You know, it's gonna be an Airbnb. That's got to look pretty good, right? That was that. Then you've got concrete, you know, for sidewalks, patios, all this other stuff. I'm not even done with landscaping yet. Like, we're just kind of letting it sit. Oh, driveway, you know, $11,000 to get a driveway put in, plus some grading and other dirt work that we had to have done. Again, we're still not done with it. So that's just the bill I have now. The electrical on this thing, I thought, you know, mobile home manufactured house, be normal electrical. Well, turns out it's like a 220 amp service. So I had to upgrade our entire electrical service going into the property. So that was great. So that, I mean, overall, this thing is just way, way, way over budget. You know, here's the good news. If I hold this thing for the next 30 years, I'll make some money on it. I'm kidding, but not really. It'll be a while before I can make some money on it and actually, you know, have some equity in this thing. But hopefully we'll be able to rent it and it'll cash flow some money every month, and help us pay our debt down on it. But yeah, so lesson learned. If you guys are out there and you're looking at getting into a new asset class or something else, do your homework first before you're running 100 miles an hour. All right. Another lesson here. This is really, I let tight numbers turn into some bad decisions. And again, without processes in place and people in place, this could happen to you guys as well. So a few recent deals in 2025 we had, you know, the numbers were pretty tight, but my team was pretty confident. You know, my acquisitions guys, hey man, I think this is an easy one. You know, do this, this, and this, and it's done and whatever. And I said, all right, cool. And I'm just moving fast. We're doing a bunch of deals. It was a busy time of year and I didn't really have like a whole process in there or anything else. I was just like kind of running and wanted to get to a yes or no quick. And so I ran some numbers myself and then I said, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me if we stick around this and a budget wise. Well, a couple of these properties had wells and septics, kind of going back to the same thing. I didn't get them tested before we closed. I don't know why. And now looking back, I'm like, I have no clue why we wouldn't have got those tested, but we didn't. And we ended up closing on them and without getting that. And I can tell you two properties in particular that one of them needs a new septic and the other one needs a well and a septic. And that mistake alone from those two deals is probably going to cost me 45,000 to 60,000 just in hard costs. That's just for the wells and the septics. That's not counting, like, again, going back to the time that our team is having to spend on these deals now, the lost rent that we're going to have until some of those things can be done. One of them we were flipping and we had a buyer lined up and they went and got a well and septic inspection done and they came back and then they failed. And so that, we had to start this whole process of what are we going to do now, right? And we talk about like it's just the capital tied up in these properties now. That's, again, opportunity cost of capital that I potentially couldn't use for other deals for that. So, if your numbers are really tight, do your homework, slow down a little bit. So if you're out there and you're brand new and you're just running 100 miles an hour, slow down a little bit, get around some other investors is what I would encourage you to do. And, find out some of these mistakes. What are some of the mistakes you guys have made in real estate? We run the REI Success Meeting, and that meets typically the fourth Tuesday of every month at the Woods Golf Course on the east side of Green Bay. So that's a great networking opportunity. We typically get 40 plus people out there at these events, and it's a great time to come and learn and grow. And, again, just get in that room and ask people, hey, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've made in your investing journey? And you'll learn a lot, right? And you won't need to make those same mistakes if you listen and pay attention and put that somewhere for your future deals. So those were a couple big things. So now you'll see with Wisconsin discount properties going forward, any property that has a questionable age of a well and septic, you will see a inspection done on those. All right. Sometimes we still won't get them if we have documentation that the well and septic are newer. It'd be kind of unnecessary at that point for the most part to get that done. But we still might. Maybe we'll even just get a water test or something done on the well to make sure that water quality is still decent. But anyway, so that was a big one. Well and septic inspections, but really it came down to just running too fast and not really having a process in place to do this. So now in our process, there are different stops in the process to make sure that before we close on a deal, we've got a well and septic inspection done on it if there is a well and septic on the property. So that is just kind of same thing. Like we learned $60,000 lesson, not going to do that again. Let's make sure we put a process in place for that. All right. Another one, again, on a previous episode, I talked about you're probably the bottleneck in your business. And in our business, we have people on our team that also can be bottlenecks to our growth. And by me not recognizing just the impact that some of these projects and initiatives that we did in 2025 would have, I created a bottleneck in our business, but it was really, I was putting a big load on people on our team. So Reese, who a lot of you guys know from our team, fantastic go-getter, young guy, full of energy, full of piss and vinegar, as people say, right? Wants to take on a lot of things, which I love. I appreciate that. But this year we started doing, more of our own flips on the deals that you guys didn't want to do. Or if it was what we would consider an easier one, and again, this is where I got in trouble with a few of those. We're like, oh, those will be pretty easy. He can run them. Well, again, he's running 100 miles an hour, right? So he was trying to run our flips from Milwaukee, which is where he was living. He's handling our whole dispositions department, our whole Wisconsin discount properties team, and he's still doing his own deals on his own. So what happened was we're doing these deals, and again, this is not Reese's fault, but we put the flip project management stuff on his plate, and it ended up being a big mistake. So he got really overwhelmed. He did the best he could, but one of the things that I would recommend for you guys, if you're doing flips, you or someone on your team has to go visit that property on a regular basis and keep your contractors on pace and make sure that they're doing the work that would meet your expectations. All right. So we had a property out west of Oshkosh, kind of in the country. on a big parcel of land. We actually still have this one at the time of this recording, and we will still have it by the time this recording drops because we haven't even listed it yet. And it should be done hopefully within the next week of this time of recording. But this is a property, by the time it actually sells, we will probably have it for a year. All right, which is sad. Maybe good for capital gains. Maybe I'll get long-term capital gains on it. I don't know. I'll have to talk to my accountant on this one. But what happened was he went out, found a contractor for it to do the work, had him bid it, came back. He came in recommended from some other people, and bid came back reasonable and decent. And I don't know that we set really clear, timelines with the contractor or what our process was. Again, I was kind of leaving a lot of this up to him to figure out, which is a big issue there. And he gave us the whole green light probably a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, that this thing was done. And our realtor Monty, my brother, went out there to go he actually went and had listing pictures done. And there was just a bunch of stuff that was just not up to the standard that we would want, and something we don't want to have, right? And we realized at that time, that was a challenge for Reese trying to manage these projects from afar without having another who to go and run and look at these properties and do these, inspections, so to speak, for us as the thing went along. That, this guy was doing the best he could. He was trying to save us money is what the contractor was doing, which we appreciate, but we weren't clearly able to communicate our expectations because we weren't there able to see what he was doing necessarily with the quality of the work, right? And aligning our expectations with the quality that we were looking for along with what he was doing. So, a couple things, we were running 130% capacity. We didn't really have clarity on responsibilities or, enough bandwidth, really. We didn't really have accountability for the contractor. Didn't really have any systems in place to support it. And sometimes you're not going to have systems right away. So I'm also a believer in massive imperfect action, right? And those two things, I go back and forth with those things, right? Sometimes you got to build the system as you go. And that is the reality of it. The problem is we didn't slow down enough as we were trying to build this process to really put some of these things in place to support, where we wanted to take this thing. We were just kind of running and gunning and figure it out as we go, but not really able to build a process in the place. And the hard part with flips and trying to build a process as you go is if you have multiple going on at the same time, these aren't like you're going to buy it and a week later you're selling it, right? Like sometimes you're not going to realize some of these mistakes until 4 or 5 months later when you're still working on your project. And now if you've got 2 or 3 of those going, you just compounded some of your issues. So the other issue with happening is, he will never say this probably, but he's probably getting a little burned out by doing this process. So he's juggling his normal duties and responsibilities of working with a lot of our buyers out there and trying to help coach them up and help move them through the process and connect them to people they need connections to and all those kinds of things. Plus sell our deals every week and prepare those, the marketing, all those sort of things. And then he was trying to take this stuff on top of it. And again, like I said, plus managing his own personal life and his own deals. So there was probably a lot of mistakes there. So these things are way slower than they should have been. We ended up having to go back and do, a bunch of rework or have our contractors go back and do a bunch of rework on it. I'm getting pulled back into these processes, right, to try to figure things out. So that's, again, more opportunities that I'm missing out on in the future. So what we ended up doing to solve this is we hired another person, and we should have hired another person way earlier than what we did, but we hired another person who's managing the processes now. And that's, one of her full-time responsibilities. She does a lot of stuff for us now too. We found a lot of other areas to take some things off other people's plates who were getting overloaded as well. But she's able to come in and do those things. And so one of the things that we're starting to do too is just find out from people where they at capacity wise on our team. How are you doing with your workload capacity? So that's another thing. If you guys have some people on your team and you're starting to throw things at them, make sure you're having some check-ins every so often with them, find out how they're doing on the capacity, right? Another thing that we do as well is I'm really good at throwing things at our team and just saying, hey, so-and-so, I need you to do this, this, or this, or this, right? And what we're doing is we're allowing now them to open up those lines of communication to me and giving permission to say, hey, where do you want me to put that on my list of priorities, right? So for Reese, example, if we would have had this established, this communication kind of rule set up, is if I would have said, hey, dude, I want you to do these flips, right? I want you to manage these projects and manage these flips. And you could say, great, Corey, I would love to take that challenge on. I love learning. I love doing new things. But you currently have me doing, working with buyers. You could have listed out all the things I have them doing and ask, where do you want me to put that on the priority list? And that would have been a really good way for us to have some honest conversation about, like, instead of them, and people on your team just trying to appease you as the business owner and do everything that you want them to do, but really start to burn out and maybe not do everything really well. Balls might start getting dropped because they just don't have the capacity to do it. People only have so many hours in a day. And so now what we're doing is we're having these discussions of if we're delegating, and people on our team know this too. If somebody else is delegating to you and you have some directives of some other priorities, they have to let you know where they want to put that on the priority list. Otherwise, you got to let them know. You as the person being delegated to have to let the person delegating to know all the other things you have going on and ask where do they want that put, right? So that's been a really good thing that we've learned through that process. So a couple things that all kind of like some through lines here. Moving too fast. All right. Again, massive imperfect action. Yes. Take massive imperfect action. Get started, but make sure you're learning those lessons. And I would say before even you take that first step, if your brand's spanking new, make sure you're talking to some of the other investors in your market or in our area who have been there before you and find out what are the bigger mistakes that they've made. We talked about that earlier, but that's such a key nugget there, guys, to make sure you're not making those same mistakes. If you're going to get into a new asset class, as we talked about, study that thing, learn it a little bit before you get into it, and do your due diligence before you go diving in. Don't take on too much. Try to just focus on one thing for now. And, speed is great, as we talked about, but speed without any kind of structure it's just chaos. All right. So always do your due diligence, no matter how busy you are. So like we talked about well and septic inspections, if they don't have any documentation for you on when that thing was put in or that it's up to code or that's been tested recently, make sure you get a well and septic inspection. All right. Make sure you're getting in there with your contractors on a regular basis. If you're not local to where this project is going on, find somebody who knows what they're doing or that you can train up and have them do these walkthroughs for you. Okay. Maybe it's your real estate agent who's good at this stuff. Maybe it's as simple as that. Like, hey man, I know you're busy and you want to sell houses and stuff, but I'm going to be doing a bunch of flips. Would you mind just going and checking on this contractor for me and sending me some pictures every so often? I'm happy to pay you. Okay. Get to know your rehab costs. That was another big one for me is, I'm just going so fast that I'm throwing in some generalities instead of actually breaking down some of these things. I would say another lesson learned here is if the numbers don't work, don't do it. Right. I think I got like sold on wanting to appease some people on my team instead of looking at appeasing my discipline and my structure of the numbers. And I'm an optimist in general. So I want to make these things work. But now they're costing us a lot of time and energy and money. So another thing, ask where you're overloaded. And then what are the things, this is something else I'm doing this year. What are the things that you really love to do? And what are the things that you do not love to do? And keep the things that you love to do and find somebody to take the things that you don't love to do off your plate. All right. I'm challenging you guys for that for this year. And again, if you're getting overloaded, if you're taking on too much stuff, in another episode, we talked about you're the bottleneck. Don't be the bottleneck. It's going to limit your growth, right? And that was an issue we had here is I was playing small with hires and I was trying to squeak out as much as I could out of our team, trying to figure out, like, without having to go through the hiring process and find somebody else to take the stuff on. It was easier and quicker just to put it on somebody else on our team. All right. And so, try to recognize that stuff ahead of time, guys. If it's you that you're throwing stuff on, try to get out in front of that and start hiring before you think you're going to need it, because you will need it. I remember that first hire that we made. I was like, well, we actually just hired her on part-time. We're like, oh, I don't even know if we'll have enough for her for part-time. And like within the first 2 weeks, we're like, hey, how would you feel about coming on full-time? Because you'll always find more things that it frees you as you bring people on to do other things, and you'll need people eventually to replace those, or you'll need people on your team to replace some of the other things that somebody on your team is doing so that they can focus on what they're really, really good at. All right. I've talked about some other things I wanted to talk to you guys about here. Again, I mentioned the inspections already and that sort of stuff, but I think overall, I don't share this stuff because these are fun things to go through, right? I share it because these are mistakes that are going to happen if you're not learning from these mistakes. So hopefully I've saved you guys a lot of pain and money and stress and other things. And hopefully this year will be a great year for you guys. Take that advice, go talk to other investors out there. Like I said earlier, continue to listen to this podcast because we'll share the successes, and you can certainly learn some great lessons from those as well of where to double down. But we'll also share, we'll make an effort to get some mistakes from some of the guests on here as well going forward. So hopefully this has been helpful, guys. I always appreciate if you guys are subscribing on YouTube to the show. If you're sharing the show, that really helps us a ton. And if you haven't left us a review yet on Apple or Spotify, we really would appreciate that. We're trying to get those numbers up as high as possible. The goal this year is to have over 100 of those on both channels. So if you guys could go out and help out with that, that would be awesome. And on YouTube, if you guys comment on here, just let me know what you think of the show, guys, of the episode. Let me know if this resonates with you or if you think I'm completely off. Either way, let's start a little discussion. That'd be fun. So appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you guys on the next episode.